The views from on top are unrivaled and something that you cannot experience until you climb it. You're looking down on everything. There is nothing you can see from the top of Mount Rainier that is higher than you are. And nothing beats that experience.
Welcome to Experiences You Should Have, your how-to guide for amazing experiences. I'm your host, Gail Manasco, and today we are going on an adventure. I met Chris Tucker just recently, right after he climbed Mount Rainier, which Mount Rainier is a very tall mountain, 14,410 feet. It's the tallest peak in Washington state, and it's about 2.5 hours southeast of Seattle. And Chris and his climbing partner, Mark, just summited Rainier, which is a very technical climb. And we're in a new era right now. We're in the midst of coronavirus, and we're doing things to maybe stay away from people or do things more out in nature. And this is a climb. This is a bucket list goal, I feel like, for a lot of people, is to climb Mount Rainier. And I really wanted to learn the how-to. How could someone go and do this? And there always is a way. There's always a way to get in there and have that adventure and to try to do it as safe as possible. So I'm not going to make you wait any longer. Let's get to the interview with Chris Tucker on climbing Mount Rainier. Welcome to the podcast, Chris. This is so exciting.
Thank you, Gail. It's nice to be here.
Yeah. So you just did an epic adventure of climbing Mount Rainier in Washington.
Yeah, my feet have not forgiven me for it yet. But yeah, epic is pretty much the right word.
That's really exciting. So I'd love for our listeners to really understand the backstory of why you were climbing Mount Rainier.
Sure. So about a decade ago, my friend Mark, who I climbed Rainier with about 10 days ago, he and I sat down and for a beer, and he went, "I've got this really dumb idea." And, you know, like all of Mark's ideas, they're pretty dumb. And so I was like, oh, nothing new there. And he said, "We're going to climb the highest point in every state." And I'm like, "Why on earth would we want to do that?" And he said, "Because, well, we can, and because it's a thing where we can get together every now and then, and your wife won't mind if we go and do it." And I couldn't actually defeat his logic on any of this. And I did ask my wife, and she said, "That's totally fine." And so we just started to get together, 2 or 3 times a year and journey to the back of beyond in various states, starting with attempting Arizona, which we failed, and then actually succeeding getting up Guadalupe in Texas. And it was like, okay, well, we kind of got into it, and we climbed a few peaks, and, Rainier is the highest point in the state of Washington at 14,400 and something feet high. And I was like, okay, that's one of the toughest ones on the list. Let's go do it.
All right.
So that was kind of how the adventure was born.
I love it. So how many attempts did it take to actually climb Rainier?
3. I basically have sat at Camp Muir, which, for those who don't know, is around about halfway. The climb kind of divides equally into a 4,500 foot climb from Paradise, Washington, up to Camp Muir, where there's essentially a safe place where everyone can camp, and there's a couple of shelters where if you're paying or lucky, you can stay. And so I've camped up at Camp Muir a total of 3 times. The first time I was learning to climb, and I did a skills seminar up there for 4 days. Never saw the top. It snowed all the time, and we came right back down again. The second time we got to Camp Muir again, the weather came down, and our climbing, we were in a team of 4, and the other 2 were beyond exhausted, and so we had to come down again anyway. And then this time, so this was the third time, and third time with charm.
Wow. So how long was it in between the first attempt and your most recent climb of Mount Rainier?
We looked back, and it was 2012 that we had originally tried to climb it in, I think, February of 2012. So 8.5 years.
And when did you start this journey of climbing the tallest peak in each state?
So that was probably 2009, April of 2009, something like that.
Wow. This has been a long goal.
It is, particularly when you consider that some of the people who've done it, who've tried to do it as quickly as possible. So I think Melissa Arnault has some record on it of like 40 days or something like that.
Wow.
And one of our climbing guides, Mike Haugen's super nice guy. He'd done it in 50 days, and he'd taken his foot off the gas, and so he didn't get to keep the record for long. And so we've taken 10, 11 years, and but we're hoping to this year.
Okay, so how many more peaks do you have left?
We got 4 more. So we
Four
have
more.
Yep. And so
which states?
Bora Peak, Idaho, Panorama Peak, Nebraska, sorry, Panorama Point, Nebraska, which I find it hard to believe there is a panorama in Nebraska, but you got to go touch them all.
Oh, wait, what's the elevation of that?
Honestly, it's actually pretty high. I think it's like the 22nd on the list or something like that. It's about 5,500 feet. It's right on the water. You could literally throw a stone from the top of Panorama Point into Colorado.
Okay.
But you can drive to the top. You get out of your car, stumble out, take a picture, do whatever you want to do, and then get back in the car and drive away. You just have to go there.
Okay.
And anyway, there's Black Elk Peak, South Dakota. And then finally we're going to try and finish on Granite Peak, Montana, which is easily the toughest of the 4 left.
Wow. Okay, so when is all that going to happen?
TBD. Hopefully later this year. Going to depend on weather and careers and,
sure
stuff. But we're going to make an attempt on it this year.
Would you try to attempt all 4 peaks in the same trip?
Yep. Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, a part of the challenge, and also the beauty of this whole thing is that you have to get there. About half of the states you can literally drive to the top, as I've said.
Right.
The problem is that they're not anywhere where you might expect to find things. So, you end up driving 6 hours from one high point to another high point. And, it's like, where are we? I don't know, but we're going to find out. All these wonderful things about, I'd never have gone to Arkansas or Oklahoma or Idaho. I've no reason to go to the places that I'm going, except for the fact that there's a mountain there.
Right.
And there's also a slice of Americana on the way. So been to Roswell, New Mexico. Wouldn't ever have gone to Roswell.
Did you see an alien in Roswell?
We saw aliens. We saw tons of aliens. As anybody who goes to Roswell knows, they're all over the place. But you never see them. You never have gone to Roswell because it's so far out of the way of anything. That, it's not worth the trip on its own. But when you're on the way, it's like, oh, hang on. We could stop. We could divert half an hour out of the way and go to Roswell. And it's totally worth it. We had lunch there. We went to the Alien Museum. It's great fun.
Oh, I love it. That is so cool. Do you believe in aliens?
Mathematically speaking, I think it's almost certain that there are aliens.
I love it. Absolutely love it. And you're a bit of a mathematician, right?
I have an undergraduate degree in mathematics from the University of
Ah,
Cambridge. So, yes.
so I'd be willing to bet on your hypothesis then.
There's all sorts of theories on why we have not made contact with aliens yet.
Mm-hmm.
And many of them are plausible. Um, One particular favorite of mine is who on earth would want to talk to human beings? Um, but there's plenty of other ones out there about the vanishingly small number of, intelligent species in a vastness of space. So
Mm,
it's difficult to imagine that we would actually ever have done so.
mm. That's interesting. But let's get back to Rainier. We
Hmm.
we
Yeah.
are we're climbing Rainier today. So it took you 3 attempts to climb Rainier,
Yep.
and you just climbed Rainier 10 days ago.
Something
And
like
I,
that. Yep.
yeah, yeah. And let's just take our listeners there. Take us on the climb and describe the experience of climbing Rainier.
Sure. So as I've mentioned, it kind of breaks down into two pieces. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's the non-technical lower section where you cart your gear up to, so you can basically go camping at 10,000 feet. Now, those who are familiar with backpacking, it's a very similar idea. You load up your tent, you load up your stove, your camping pad, your sleeping bag, and you just have to bear in mind that all of these things are overspec'd based on what you're used to. So if you're used to camping in the woods, you've probably got a sleeping bag that's rated down to about freezing or a little below. You've got a tent that would blow down if a stiff breeze came by, but it never does because you're in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
And none of these things are true when you're up in the mountains. So you're at 10,000 feet, you easily get winds of 30, 40 miles an hour. And so your
Wow.
tent has to be designed accordingly. And so it weighs a lot more. And your sleeping bag needs to keep you warm in temperatures of 20 below, and so it weighs a lot more. And so you start to add all these things up, and then you add the rope, the crampons, the climbing boots, the safety gear, the ice axe that you need, and suddenly you're carrying 45 pounds or 20 kilos for those who prefer that. The metric system, you're carrying a lot of weight up the mountain. And so the first 4.5 hours for us were get up really early and just start walking up the hill with a very heavy pack on.
Mm-hmm.
And having done this bit 3 times now, the first 2 times had taught us that it's nothing more than just left foot, right foot, get up the hill. When you're there, and until you're there, just keep moving.
Mm-hmm.
And you get probably at halfway on regular footpaths, and then you're crossing what's called the John Muir Snowfield, which is just a permanent feature where there's 24 hours, no, there's 12 months a year there's snow. There's snow on the ground, and so you just start walking up the snow, but you don't need crampons, you don't need safety gear, you just need to walk up the snow. And so we eventually got to the top after about 4.5 hours, totally pooped. Put the tent up, had some food, and sat down for a bit, right? Because there's nothing to do, and you're there at lunchtime, and all you're doing is what is known as sport eating until it's time to go again.
Wow.
So yeah, so that was kind of the first day. That was Saturday, and we just
Yeah.
sat around, and the ranger comes by and checks your paperwork because everybody needs a climbing permit. And turns out that the ranger is one of the was the lead guide on the first climb we did. So the person who is responsible for teaching us to climb Rainier is now checking our paperwork to make sure we're allowed to climb Rainier. The
Wow.
guy's name's Seth Waterfall. He says, "Hi, I'm Seth." He's like, "Yeah, I know you're Seth Waterfall, right?" It was a really nice moment because it's like the circle completes. He's taught us what we need to know, and now he's just making sure we're okay and know what we're doing.
Right.
Off we go.
Cool.
So that was cool, and I actually said hi to him on the way back down and thanked him once we'd summited. So it was it was a fun moment.
Yeah.
But then essentially, you have dinner after a while, the sun goes down, you settle into bed real early because, most parties will choose to depart for the summit between midnight and 2 a.m., which
No,
is not my
why
favorite.
then?
Right, very good question. It is not my favorite part of mountaineering, I have to say. The alpine start it goes against every fiber in my being. But there is a rationale for it. On Rainier in particular, you're in rather and rather high risk of rockfall and snowfall, and these typically happen when snow and ice melts, which happens a lot more when the sun is up and a lot less when it is dark. So
Hmm.
it's a lot safer, particularly in certain pieces where the objective hazard, as we call it, is a lot higher, to get it done at night. And so we got up at 1 a.m. We were almost the last party out when we left at 2 a.m.
Wow.
And we moved on up the mountain as quick as we could to get out of the risky section before anything started to fall on our heads.
Whew.
So, but
So
the good
how
news,
long did that take from time you left to the time you summited?
it took about 7 hours.
Wow.
The good news about the upper side of the mountain is you get to leave a lot of the gear behind. So that big heavy pack that you started out with has now dwindled significantly. And most of the weight you're carrying is either on your hard climbing harness in forms of the safety gear, or in your hand in forms of your ice axe, or on your feet in forms of mountaineering boots and crampons. The real weight is in your pack is a little bit of warm weather gear and a lot of water.
Got it.
And you basically walk very slowly up the mountain because you're starting at 10,000 feet. I'm a
Whew.
flatlander. I'm recording this from Sacramento, where the elevation is 15 feet above sea level. My house is a little higher than that, so I'm at more like 25 feet above sea level.
Oh, wow.
Makes a difference. And so I'm not used to the altitude, and so it's a big deal, and it's one of the things that gets a lot of people into trouble. And a lot of people who got up before we did were turning around because they'd moved too quickly or they weren't used to altitude. And we passed at least 4 parties going the other way who had not made it.
Wow.
And fair play to them; they turned around.
Right.
Right? It's a big thing to turn around before you get into trouble,
Hmm.
right? I've
Hmm.
turned around a dozen times on mountains, and there's no shame in it at all. It's actually for me and Mark, it's a point of pride. Yeah, we turned around
Hmm.
because we should turn around. The people you read about are the people who didn't turn around and then couldn't get back down safely,
Got
right?
it.
So
Right.
just think about that one for a while. If you are done,
Hmm.
you have to go. When you get to the top, you still have another 6 hours to go to get back down again. So don't think that just because you got to the top, you're okay. No, you now have the most problem you've had all day.
Right.
It's like
Right. A
yeah,
helicopter isn't just going to stop by and pick you up at the
it's
top.
not, and I don't know that it even could. Readers will probably correct me on this, but I'm not sure that you could get helicoptered off the mountain at 14,000 feet.
Mm.
So you get to walk down, and you get to put a lot of other people's lives in risk by having to accompany you down and having to wait while you walk down, and it's not good practice.
Hmm.
Keep the
Hmm.
energy for coming back. As it
Right.
was, we went up just fine. It was a slow and steady move. The trail was well established, and we got to the top. And the top is actually kind of this because it's a volcano. There's a crater at the top, and we just kind of sat in the crater for a little while and had some lunch. I had a very nice meal from Food for the Soul. It's a little Bend business from your hometown there.
Huh.
Made a really nice little cold soaked meal that I've just shoved in my face as quick as I could. Got back to
Fabulous.
calories, of which I was burning a ferocious amount, and then we rode back up and came back down again. You know, it's just one of those. Why do you climb it then if all you're going to do is come back down? And all I can tell you is that the views from on top are unrivaled and something that you cannot experience until you climb it. You're looking down on everything. There is nothing you can see from the top of Mount Rainier that is higher than you are. Seattle is a little blip. Mount Adams is, a couple of thousand feet shorter and is over there. You can see St. Helens. You can see a long way, but you cannot see anything that is higher than you are. Everything is below, and nothing beats that experience.
That is beautifully said. That is absolutely beautifully said. And so when you're up there in the ice and snow, you mentioned you have ropes, you have ice picks. I mean, what is that like essentially?
Well, technically it's an ice axe. The pick is
Oh,
the bit on the end of the ice axe,
oh, okay.
which you kind of use. It's also what you use for breaking big blocks of ice that are in your freezer.
Mm-hmm.
But a mountaineering ice axe is usually about 50 centimeters long, and is designed to save your life if you slip. Right? You're
Mm.
on a crevasse. Sorry, you're on a glacier, and around you are huge cracks in the ice.
Mm-hmm.
Because the ice, as it turns out, flows downhill. So it snows up on top, forms ice, and then the
Mm-hmm.
pressure of the snow that forms above causes this glacial, essentially a river of ice to go down the mountain. But because it has to go around bends and over convex rollovers and so on and so forth, the ice cracks as it does this because it doesn't flow like regular water does because it's frozen. And the cracks are very, very, very deep. And if you fall into one, you're going to have a real hard time getting back out. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the real reason that we rope up, is because we're mostly afraid of falling into the mountain. We're way less afraid of falling off the mountain in
Mm-hmm.
this particular context. It's different to how rock climbers worry about it. Rock climbers are worried about falling off the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm worried about slipping or a snow bridge collapsing or whatever, and I'm going into a crevasse, and then it's my buddy's job and duty to fall to the ground, kick his feet in, get his ice axe driven into the ground, and self-arrest so as to catch me.
Got it.
And then we can figure out how to get me out, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
climb up the rope, and or he can haul me out if there's a problem. All things that you can learn how to do. But you see people on their own. It's like, if you slip, you are done. Nobody is going to even know.
Right.
Unless somebody sees you fall into a crevasse, they wouldn't even know you're down there, because
Uh-huh.
you can be 100 feet down at the bottom of that crack, and that's where you end up,
Right.
right? And there's
Wow.
plenty of people who are interred on the side of Mount Rainier, for one unfortunate reason or another.
Mm-hmm.
And it's you do what you can to prevent that, right? And that's why you carry all the safety gear, and that's why your pack weighs so much on the way up. That's the other reason your pack weighs so much, is because you need to keep the stuff to keep you safe.
Oh,
And learning about that is critical to anybody who wants to consider going up there, right?
yeah. So are you and Mark attached to each other with a rope?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I apologize. I'm not a mountain
Yes,
climber.
you wear a climbing harness much like anybody would do in a rock climbing gym. They
Right.
have a similar function.
Yeah.
They're a little lighter. They don't quite perform the same way in terms of comfort, but you're not going to be hanging off it ever.
Mm-hmm.
In the ideal world, you would never. The only
Mm-hmm.
thing you're doing is you're
Mm-hmm.
wearing it, and then you clip your rope. You tie your rope into the main belay loop on your harness, and
Uh-huh.
the rope used probably was it about 30 feet of rope between me and Mark,
Mm-hmm.
as we go up the mountain.
Wow. I mean, what an experience. I mean, I feel like that's like the peak of adventure of
It is, and
climbing.
at the same time, you kind of like this is actually relatively normal when you get into it. And there's bits on the climb. It's like, okay, we need to be a little careful here. There's an enormous crack down there. It's very narrow where we are. And, we had one moment where we were trying to pass another party coming down.
Uh-huh.
And we're just looking down. We're on a 45-degree slope looking down to the right, thinking, that's one of those crevasses I was telling you about. It's just down there. How do we get past this other group? And so we had a what we call a fixed protection. So we put a picket. It was basically about a 2-foot long piece of aluminium. You hammer it into the snow,
Uh-huh.
and then you can clip into the top of it. And it's not going anywhere. And so the rope is clipped into the picket, and we are attached to the rope. And so if either of us falls, all that's going to happen is we're going to be hanging off this picket, looking foolish, and we're going to stand back up, climb back up to where we were, and go, okay, well, good job we put the picket in, right?
Yeah.
And so we drove the picket in, and then hung on. We basically moved down a couple of feet off the trail onto this very dicey little area where we could just, stand for a few minutes and while this other party came through.
Yeah.
And then you pull your picket back out and keep going up the hill. So you can kind of protect yourself in this sort of a way that, you're attaching yourself to the mountain temporarily, in the same way that a rock climber would put in a cam or something into a crack.
Got it. Now, when you summited, do you have maybe a tradition you do? Is there like some type of dance or a handshake or like... like what happens at the top?
Yeah, what happens at the top, it really depends a little bit on the top. Most summits we've had a beer. I will fully admit this. We'll get to the top, we'll drink a beer, and then we'll come back down again. We always take a selfie. So there's a collection now somewhere out there of 46 selfies on various summits. But this one, we did not drink a beer because it's dangerous coming back down again. That was not on the cards.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And although there were plenty of people up there who were having a can of, well, you guessed it, Rainier beer. Yeah, I was like, good one, guys. I'm still not drinking. I'm going back down. The selfie was very brief because the wind was over 30 miles an hour and it was kind of cold.
Okay.
And the fingers weren't exactly doing what they should have been doing, which is huddling in a glove. And so it was like, quick, selfie, done. Okay, let's get back off here.
Okay, got it. All right. So no big dance party.
No, and sometimes there's a summit register, but I didn't see one up there. So you can sometimes sign the list of all the people who've climbed, but I didn't see one up there. So
yeah, wow. So coming back down, what is that like?
Honestly, it's scary. This is the bit where the rubber meets the road, because you're tired and you can see what you're doing. If you imagine climbing a ladder going up, right? Climbing a ladder going up is like you can hold on to the ladder. It's relatively secure feeling, right? You hope that somebody's footing the ladder, but you can climb up and hold on. When you climb back down a ladder, you keep your toes in and you just work your way back the way you came. But there's no way from a practical standpoint to do that descending a mountain. So you have to turn and face. So you're going to walk down this mountain forwards down a 45-degree slope. And you can see everything. You can see down to where the Wonderland Trail goes around Mount Rainier, which goes around about 3,500 feet. So I can see a drop of 10,000 feet in front of me. I can see the seracs around. I can see the crevasses in the ice. I can see everything. And it's a lot more real coming down than it is going up. And you're tired and you're trying very hard to focus. It's not my favorite piece, I have to say. I like climbing. I don't like descending. Some people have it the wrong way around and they say, oh yeah, well, it's really hard going up, but coming down is fine. It's like, no, it's never been going up far enough. Then you learn to enjoy the climb and dread the coming down again. It's like, I just want, we've actually taken to skiing a bunch of different mountains if we can, because coming down is so much nicer when you're on skis than it is when you're trying to walk.
Right.
So we skied down Mount Hood, having skied up it.
Oh, lovely.
And that was a lot more fun. But it's challenging. But you keep your focus and you get it done, and you get back to Camp Muir, and there's the tent. And Mark had a big case of like, I want to get out of here. He's like, let's pack up and go. I'm like, you can pack up and go. I'm going to lie down for a half hour. I was done. I mean, we'd been on our feet for 12 hours and we just, he went, yeah, fair enough. And we crawled in the tent and we're both snoring away in 5 minutes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just took a half hour, but you get your boots off so your feet get happy and you get some rest and you're mentally alert again. And you're now equipped to do the last chunk, which is a couple more hours back down to the car.
Got it.
There's no more danger. There's no danger after once you get down to Muir, and plenty of people day hike Camp Muir. But it's just heavy and hard work, and my feet were killing me when I got back down. And I just remember sitting in the parking lot with all our dirtbag climbing gear on, just going, I'm going to have a beer right here in the parking lot. And there's tons of tourists around taking pictures or whatever, and it's super pretty. And it's a wonderful thing that they can get up there and do that. And just like, we're like, nah, don't care. Don't need to see the mountain. Just need a beer. And the ranger came past and saw us and he went, how was it? You guys summit? He went, yep. He went, cool. Didn't care that we were drinking a beer. There's no problem there.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if we'd been like tourists making a ruckus and drinking a beer, he'd have run us out of there. But it's like,
right.
You guys earned it.
You absolutely earned that beer.
Yeah.
Well, and I love it when you can have a beer after you've truly worked hard for it, where you had that incredible day or that experience and the taste of a beer after that.
Oh, right. Isn't it so much nicer?
Oh, yeah.
When you add it up and you've just done, it was 36 hours parking lot to summit the parking lot for us.
Whew.
36 hours, much of which we've been moving. And, I did a back of envelope calc that said we'd burn 10,000 calories each in 36 hours, which is way beyond your body's ability to replace it. And so, it was like, hey, man, I just lost 2 pounds in weight. Give me a beer.
Wow. Well, let's talk some logistics for climbing Rainier. So if someone wants to attempt Rainier, essentially, I guess, like, what type of skills do they need? How much experience should they have before even attempting such a feat?
It's an interesting question because there's 2 paths you can go down. Right? If you want to go self-guided, as we were, the answer is very different than if you want to essentially pay a guide service to take you up. And there's about 3 different guide services. There's RMI that we've climbed with a couple of times. There's IMG, International Mountain Guides, and there's, I think, the American Alpine Institute, all of which run trips up the mountain, where there's a guide on the front and 2 or 3 climbers, client climbers on the same rope. And they'll shepherd you up. You camp at Muir, and then they'll shepherd you up the mountain, shepherd you down the mountain. In order to join one of those groups, you can basically pay something like $1,400 plus, you got to get your gear, much of which you can rent from Whittaker Mountaineering down at the bottom, and certainly all the technical gear you can rent, and then you're going to be taught on day 1 how to self-arrest. Right, so how to use your ice axe to stop yourself falling off the mountain.
Wow.
That's like the lesson on day 1. But the guide is going to make sure that your harness is doubled back, that your rope is tied in properly, that there is nothing, you're not doing anything stupid, and they're just going to get you up the mountain as best they can. You still have to burn the 10,000 calories. And so really it's like, it's probably the all-in cost once you've got your rental gear and everything else is going to run you about $2,000, maybe $2,500, and a boatload of fitness, right?
Okay. So,
You
what
can't.
type of shape do you need to be in if you were to go up with like a
Um,
guided group?
yeah, you've got to be you've got to be in a position where you can be on your feet for 12 hours,
Hmm.
right? This is, and moving, not moving fast, but still, moving inexorably forward and able to stay alert and mentally aware. And so this translates into, if you are a local, if you do like, local 5K or 10K runs, that is not going to cut it, right? You've got to be able to go hiking for a day, right? I mean, forget the
Hmm.
backpack thing, but you've got to be able to hike for a day, and you've got to be able to climb, 1,000 feet and not get to the top and think, I'm done, right? So go for a hike. Do
Hmm.
your favorite hike. Let's say do an 8 mile hike with 3,000 feet of climb in it, right? That's not that dissimilar to Summit Day, which I think is probably close to 8 miles and more like 5,000 feet of climb. But you can
Hmm.
push yourself. But after eight miles and 3K vert, how are you feeling? And if the answer is not good, then you need to go and do more training, right? Because you're going to have some weight on your back and you're going to be in difficult conditions and you're going to be at elevation. And all of these things are going to work against you. Oh, and it's going to be cold. None of these things are happening on your favorite hike. So you need to get back from your favorite hike going, that was a good hike. Cool. What are we doing now? Not, I need to take a nap, kill me, I'm hurting all over. That's the guidance on that.
Okay. All right. That's good guidance. That's really good guidance.
Um,
And so if someone were fit, they are in shape, but maybe they've never climbed a technical mountain.
mhm.
Maybe they've done big hikes and that sort of thing, but nothing where it required an ice axe or anything.
Yeah,
Could they go with a guided group or
absolutely.
would they okay, they
Yeah,
could.
because the guided group are going to teach you. Well, and I would recommend some parties have they'll have a 4 day climb or a 5 day climb. If you are less certain about your ability, do the longer climb because there'll be more opportunity to learn and refresh those skills, right?
Okay.
The 4 day climb is essentially you arrive on day one and you do a quick refresher on this stuff. And, you'll practice again on the way up. And then you're on the mountain on day three and coming back down on day four, right? I mean, there's not a lot of time to really get this knowledge to be, you know, kind of a natural thing, right? You
Mhm.
have to, and when somebody on your rope yells falling, you've got to be in self arrest in a split second, or you're going to be falling too,
Mhm.
right? And in order to get to that point, you need to practice it, right? And that's all it is. It's just practice, and it's a
Right.
skill like any other, and it's not that difficult a skill. To be quite frank, it's not that hard as long as you learn it, and as long as you refresh it. And every beginning of every season, you hurl yourself to the ground a couple more times, and
Mhm.
just get back into it. And so, do a slightly longer climb if you're uncomfortable with it. Reality is that the guides are there to protect you, but they're not infallible, and they've got to be able to stop a team of 3 people falling off a mountain, all of whom
Mhm.
are going to potentially fail to self arrest properly, and that's not a guarantee. So it really helps to have to have the ability to protect yourself, because you protect yourself, you protect your team. And that's really kind of what you want to be practicing.
Got it.
The rest of the skills are, the guide is going to take you through, and it's going to, do most of the work, most of the thought work for you.
Right.
But self arrest is something that you absolutely have to know.
Okay. And you mentioned that you had a permit to climb. If you go with one of these groups, um, would they essentially get the permit for you, or do you need
Yeah,
to get that in advance?
yeah. So they'll do the hard work on that front for you, right?
Okay.
That's included in your $1,400 or whatever.
Right.
If you're climbing on your own, you need two things. One is a reservation, a campground reservation, essentially, which you get through the Park Service for Rainier, so
Mhm.
nps.gov/RAIN. They have on there, here's when you can camp at Mount Rainier, in
Mhm.
Camp Muir, sorry. And much like, if you wanted to make a reservation to go and do the Wonderland Trail, or if you wanted to go and camp at Little Yosemite Valley or anywhere else in the country, there's a reservation.
Right.
You make your reservation, you get your campground permit. You also need a climbing permit, which basically says, yes, I wish to go on a glacier. And this is the difference between a day hiker who cannot go higher than Camp Muir and a climber who is now allowed on the glacier that starts right there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's it's kind of a group insurance policy that says we're going to have to rescue a bunch of people and you need to pay us $51 because it might be you.
Mm-hmm.
We very much hope that it's not. And if we have to rescue one climber in 100, then, it's $5,000 per climber we rescue. That makes sense to everybody, right? And so
Right.
then it's fine. It's like, I don't want it to be me either. I will do my
Right.
level best not to spend that $51. I would just want to go into the pool and have it used on somebody else.
Yeah.
Um, but that's
Yeah.
the other piece that you need.
Now, when is the best time of year, maybe for the best weather windows and that sort of thing, to climb Rainier?
You will get a lot of different answers to that question.
Okay.
And the reality is that the season is now basically over. You could probably still climb it, give it another week or two, and it's not going to be easy at all.
Mm-hmm.
What happens on the upper mountain is that when the snow melts, all of the crevasses become exposed. So in February, you can't see the crevasses because they're all full of snow, and you can happily walk over them. You don't even know they're there half the time, but you can't fall in because it's already chock full of snow, right?
Right.
The downside of February is it's freezing cold, the weather is lousy, and the snow is very deep and nobody else is climbing. So you have to break trail, you have to deal with the fact that visibility and wind and precipitation and avalanche risk is going to be way high. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when we climbed. That's actually the first time we went up was in February. And we didn't get sight of summit. And so most people consider the climbing window to be about the end of April to about now, which, if you're listening later, is the middle of August.
All right.
And the only other thing that I would say on this one, if you're not going with a guide service, if you're going to do it on your own, the best advice I have on a successful summit is to have not one day that you could possibly summit, but 3 or 4 days that you could possibly summit. Because you're going to arrive, if you're coming from Seattle, you can just go, hey man, the weather's terrible, we're not going.
Right.
If you're coming from, DC or, Dallas or, somewhere where it's a journey to get there, you're going to arrive and you're going to find out the weather is terrible for 2 days and you're going to sit in the bunkhouse at the bottom of the mountain and go, man, this sucks.
Yeah.
But it
Right.
doesn't suck anywhere near as much as getting there. And if you only had one day and it was snowing that day and you couldn't do it, it's like, no, forget it. If you have
Mm-hmm.
4 days that it's possible, then hey, well, you sit in the bunkhouse and have a beer for a couple of days.
Right.
And then the third day, the sun comes out and you go climb the mountain. Right. So
Yeah.
give it the time. And the local climbers who I've climbed with and met, are just like, yeah, if it's a bad day, we don't even go to the mountain.
Right.
And that's how you get around that problem, is give yourself a bigger window.
Right. Now, what about maybe people with limited mobility, or maybe they're looking for an accessible adventure on Mount Rainier? Are there accessible parts of Rainier that people could go to?
Absolutely. Yes, there are. Although, much like everything else with Rainier, there's some. It's not easy accessible, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I mean by this is that there is a paved trail that'll get you up about 1,000 feet, maybe a little more above Paradise. Paradise is kind of the base of the mountain. And you can get up and there's some wonderful views on this trail. And so, if you have a wheelchair or, if you otherwise find it difficult to walk on, rocky, broken trail, there's a paved trail. It's just steep.
Mm.
So, I don't know what I mean, I'm not experienced in this, but if you had, somebody who was willing to help, or a couple of people who were willing to help push you up the hill, and you could potentially get a good way up the mountain on the trail, without worrying about it. You'd better be careful on the way down. Same sort of thing as we have is that the accidents in this case definitely happen on the way back down, not on the way up.
Yeah. Right. Right.
But yeah, it's right out of the parking lot, and you can get some killer views from up there. And actually, one of my favorite pictures that I took, or that Mark took at me, was underneath the mountain. At the bottom of the glaciers, you can see them all falling down off the mountain, and I'm just sitting there having sweated bullets for the first hour or so with my pack on, and that's all accessible. And so it's one of the few. There's not that many bits of the Park Service where there are these paved trails that actually get into kind of what I would think of as a wilderness setting.
Yeah.
So it's nice in that regard.
All right. That's good to know. Really good to know. And are there any other additional dangers of Rainier that you haven't talked about?
Um, the only one I mentioned avalanche risk, objective risk, crevasses. The one I really haven't mentioned is altitude.
Uh-huh.
And this is one that affects everybody individually and very differently. Some people never notice the fact that they're up at 14,000 feet, other than the fact that they get a little short of breath. Some people get a headache. Some people get nausea and dizziness. And some people get impaired judgment and issues with breathing and issues with two actual life-threatening conditions, which are pulmonary edema and cerebral edema, which essentially
Mm.
is water buildup on the lungs or the brain. And it pays to know the symptoms. And I'm not going to go into those here because I'm not a doctor and not qualified to tell you. But
Mhm.
if you have difficulty breathing, if you have difficulty assessing what is going on and you become confused, or your friend, more likely, is you're going to figure out your friend is confused, and
Mhm.
not dealing well with what's going on, you got to come down, right? It's the very simple solution to altitude problems is not to start popping pills; it's to descend,
Mhm.
right, and quickly,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so, keep the lines of communication going within your party about how you are feeling and any adverse symptoms that you will be suffering, right? I had a little lightheadedness. I just told Mark it's nothing major yet, but just so you know.
Mhm.
And you just keep it open. And mine, as it happened, went away, and I got a dehydration headache on the way down, but that was distinct and different.
Right.
But it's one thing that, if it doesn't cause the problems on its own, it can exacerbate any other problems that are there because of the impaired judgment and the impaired physical ability that it brings.
Mhm.
And that's why it's a dangerous thing to do. Well, it's a compounding feature on the danger level, along with the
Mhm.
weather and the situation that
Right.
you can already like see and look at.
Wow.
So not to be taken lightly, but again, when you look at the whole risk profile, it's the sort of thing that with training and with the right guidance and with the right rope team, you can mitigate a lot of the risk. You
Right.
cannot eliminate the risk. You should definitely have your life insurance paid up. Um, and I'm not joking. If you need life insurance, you should have it, right?
Right.
And that's
Right.
a good thing to check. And you should make
Right.
sure that you are that if a rescue is deployed, that you have insurance for that, which you can get through the American Alpine Association.
Okay.
You can get $50,000 of evacuation insured cover through those guys. And your cell phone will probably work, but it might pay to have an inReach or a spot device that you can send up the SOS if you do have a problem, so
Mhm.
that people know. But it's pretty much you're going to be self sufficient, because any help that's coming is coming in many hours, not 5 minutes. so
Mhm.
so take care of you take responsibility for your own safety, not don't rely on others. I think that's my summary of the risks, but mitigatable if you are studious and careful and thoughtful in your approach.
It's good advice. Are there any final tips for our listeners who maybe want to embark on this adventure?
Yeah, I would say a couple of things. One is to take regular breaks, and go slowly. Go slow. Go stupid slow. If you go
Yeah.
stupid slow, you will actually start to overtake people. It's funny.
Huh.
Um,
The tortoise and the
and
hare.
right. Oh yeah. No, it's very much so. And so I was saying that there were like we passed at least 4 parties coming down the other way who had raced out ahead of us, and we were still going up. They didn't
Yeah.
make it.
Wow.
Guess what? Um, we were stupid slow. Not kidding. We took a long time to get to the top. We took 7.5 hours to get to the top, which
Wow.
is around about 8 hours is around about turnaround time.
Uh-huh.
So we were right there. And the
Okay.
second one is to take your time, and from time to time when you stop and find somewhere safe and comfortable to stop and just take it in, because it's an amazing physical feat that you're doing, but it's an amazing uplift for the soul looking out on this place and
Mm-hmm.
seeing something that is just breathtaking. And not because of the altitude, because it just is. You will not see it anywhere else. And anybody who tries to go up and come back down stupid fast missed it. Guess what? I stopped for 15 minutes, took a breather, ate an energy bar, and looked at this is amazing. So
Mm-hmm.
so that would be my other heartfelt tip is to smell the roses
Oh,
as it were.
thank, thank you. Chris, beautifully said. Truly beautiful. Thank you for sharing your experience and taking us on the mountain with you today.
Absolutely, that's
And
been my pleasure.
yeah, and maybe there will be some people out there who are planning a bucket list trip to climb Rainier, and they can use this time to get in shape.
Yeah, there you go. Get on the bike, climb on the bike, climb on your with your running shoes on,
Yeah.
but just keep climbing, as we
All
say.
right. Ah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, I've enjoyed it very much. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for listening to Experiences You Should Have. Now, if you are inspired to maybe go up with a group to climb Rainier, now is the time to be signing up for next year because these spots fill up. If you're not going to be going up and doing it on your own, maybe you're new to climbing and you're going to be working on getting in shape, or you're already in shape. Now is the time to make those reservations for 2021. If you wait too long, it might be 2022. So just a note to get on that and go get in shape and maybe go explore the highest peak in your own state. You never know what you might find. Also, if you would like more information, please go to experiencesyoushouldhave.com. There I've got really nice show notes and write up and more information. So experiencesyoushouldhave.com, click on episodes, and there you'll find the show notes. And finally, please share this episode with a friend, family, maybe people you're waving to across the street. Tell them to listen to Experiences You Should Have podcast. We are growing organically, and every person you tell just helps us grow and get better. Thanks for listening, and until our next adventure.